The office was too quiet for a Tuesday night. Elliot Kane sat alone at his desk, his posture a mix of fatigue and stubborn determination. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead provided the only semblance of company, their relentless flicker casting faint shadows against the drab gray walls. He adjusted his glasses and sighed, the click of his keyboard, the lone punctuation in the stillness. The rest of the floor had emptied hours ago, but the quarterly report wasn't going to write itself. It was the kind of night that should have been uneventful, mundane, just like every other evening he'd spent here. Yet, tonight felt different. A strange tension hung in the air, prickling at his senses. Elliot paused mid-typing, his fingers hovering over the keys. He looked up, peering into the dim corridor beyond his cubicle. Nothing. Just the usual oppressive silence. He gave a dry chuckle under his breath, brushing it off as overwork or caffeine withdrawal. Then came the sound. It was faint at first, a whisper of movement that could have easily been the building settling or a distant HVAC system groaning to life. But then it came again, closer this time, a subtle shift, like the scrape of fabric against the carpet. Elliot froze. "Hello?" he called out, his voice cutting through the silence, tinged with unease. The echo of his words mocked him, bouncing back from the empty walls. He stood pushing his chair back with a creak. He scanned the room, his eyes darting between the cubicle partitions that created a maze around him. Nothing moved, yet the feeling of being watched crept over him like a cold breath on the back of his neck. Elliot was not a paranoid man. He prided himself on logic, on reason. But tonight, reason was failing him. "Just go home," he muttered to himself, reaching for his coat draped over the chair. The lights flickered. His hand froze mid-reach. The flicker was brief, but wrong somehow. Too deliberate, too synchronized. He straightened, heart thudding now, his ears straining for any further sound. It came from the far corner of the office, a faint rhythmic tapping. Elliot turned slowly, his pulse quickening. The sound wasn't random, it was deliberate, like fingertips drumming on a hard surface. "Is someone there?" he demanded, his voice firmer this time, though it betrayed a thread of nervousness. No reply. The tapping stopped, leaving the silence heavier than before. Elliot hesitated. Against his better judgment, he took a tentative step forward, then another, following the source of the sound. The rows of cubicles stretched endlessly in the gloom, their edges softened by the dim light. He reached the corner where the tapping had come from. A desk lamp, the only one still lit, cast a weak pool of light over the empty chair. The desktop was bare save for a single sheet of paper. Elliot frowned. That hadn't been there before. The paper was folded neatly, resting in the exact center of the desk. Against his instincts, he picked it up and unfolded it. The message was simple, typed in a stark, bold font. "Do not look up." The breath caught in his throat. His body went rigid, every muscle screaming to obey the command, but his instincts wrestled with reason. Someone was playing a cruel joke, he told himself, yet the chill spreading through his veins suggested otherwise. He gripped the paper tightly, his knuckles whitening, and forced himself to glance upward. Nothing. The ceiling panels loomed, plain and unassuming. He released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, a shaky laugh escaping him. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. Then the lights cut out. Elliot froze in the absolute darkness, the paper slipping from his fingers. He tried to move, to call out, but the air felt thick, oppressive. Somewhere in the black, a new sound emerged, a low, resonant hum that vibrated in his chest. Before he could process it, a faint blue glow appeared, illuminating the far end of the room. The light shimmered, almost liquid in quality, casting eerie reflections along the walls. And then, he saw her. She emerged from the glow like a phantom, her silhouette slender and impossibly graceful. As she stepped closer, the glow intensified, revealing her features. Her skin was a deep cerulean, shimmering faintly as if lit from within. Her silver eyes locked onto his, alien yet disarmingly human in their intensity. Elliot stumbled back, his voice finally returning in a strangled whisper. What are you? She didn't answer. In a fluid motion, she raised a hand, and a wave of blue light surged toward him. It struck before he could react, his body going limp as consciousness slipped away. The last thing he saw was her face, a strange mix of determination and regret, before the darkness claimed him. When Elliot awoke, the world was no longer his own. Elliot's first sensation was weightlessness. It was as though he were adrift in some vast, soundless ocean, suspended between wakefulness and a dream. He tried to move, to claw through the murky haze clouding his thoughts, but his body refused to obey. A faint glow pressed against his eyelids, and gradually, reality seeped back in, along with the gnawing unease that whatever he was waking to would be far from ordinary. When he opened his eyes, the world was unrecognizable. He was encased in a crystalline chamber, its walls shimmering with faint pulses of iridescent light. Beyond the translucent surface, an alien landscape unfolded. Towering spires of glass-like material rose into an endless sky, glowing with hues that shifted between violet and deep blue. The ground sparkled as though embedded with countless gemstones, and an unnatural stillness permeated the air. Panic surged in his chest. He slammed a hand against the chamber's smooth wall, the sound absorbed into the dense, muffling silence. His voice, when he tried to cry out, was absent, replaced by an empty, choking void. He was mute. Frantic now, Elliot clawed at his throat, feeling for some obstruction, but his skin was smooth and untouched. His breaths came shallow and quick, each one feeding his rising dread. A shadow moved on the other side of the crystalline wall. He froze, his heart thundering as the figure approached. It was her, the woman from the office, the blue-skinned intruder who had dragged him from his world into this strange, glowing nightmare. Up close, she was even more unnerving. Her silver eyes glimmered with an intensity that suggested they could see through him, and her fluid movements betrayed a grace that was both mesmerizing and alien. She wore a fitted garment that shimmered like liquid metal, its design unfamiliar but clearly advanced. Elliot pressed a hand against the wall, his expression a mix of pleading and defiance. She paused, tilting her head as though studying him. For a moment, he thought she might speak, or better yet, release him. But instead, she raised a slender hand, her fingers glowing faintly as they brushed against the crystalline surface. The chamber shifted. The walls seemed to liquefy, rippling outward before vanishing entirely. The sudden absence of confinement should have been a relief, but the absence of his voice made it feel like a cruel trade. Elliot stumbled back, his legs trembling beneath him. She stepped closer, her voice soft but resonant. "Calm yourself, Elliot Kane. You are unharmed." The sound of his name on her lips sent a jolt through him. It was too familiar, too intimate, coming from a being who had stolen him from everything he knew. He pointed to his throat, his silent anguish clear in his wide eyes and frantic gestures. The woman hesitated, a flicker of regret crossing her face. "Your voice is restricted for now. A necessary precaution. I will explain." She reached for a sleek, oval device attached to her waist, pressing it gently. A holographic display appeared between them, filled with symbols and diagrams Elliot couldn't begin to comprehend. She gestured toward it, her movements deliberate and controlled. "This world," she began, her tone a mix of pride and urgency, "is Elentheris, my home. You are here because you carry something rare, something vital. Your DNA possesses a unique genetic marker that we have sought for generations." Elliot frowned, his confusion deepening. Genetic marker? Generations? None of it made sense. He shook his head, trying to convey his disbelief, his silent demand for clearer answers. Her silver eyes softened, though her expression remained resolute. "You are not the first we have observed, Elliot Kane, but you are the first to meet the parameters. It is not by chance that you were chosen. Your world has been monitored. Monitored. The word hit him like a blow. A memory surfaced. Those nights when he'd felt watched, those fleeting moments of inexplicable unease. He had dismissed them as paranoia, but now they reared their heads, demanding acknowledgement. He clenched his fists, anger flaring beneath his fear. He motioned sharply at the ground, then back at himself, the universal gesture for "take me home." Her expression darkened slightly, and she took a step closer. "I cannot." Elliot's breath hitched. He stepped back, the crystalline ground beneath him responding with faint ripples of light. "You must listen," she said, her voice firm. "My people face extinction. Our prince, Kalor, heir to the throne, is gravely ill. The disease that afflicts him has no cure among us. Your DNA holds the answer. Without your cooperation, he will die." The weight of her words pressed against him, their enormity almost too much to comprehend. He wanted to scream, to demand why, of all people, it had to be him. But the silence robbed him of that release, leaving his frustration to churn inside, volatile and unspent. Erin, as if sensing his turmoil, softened her tone. "I do not expect you to understand, but I had no choice. Time is running out. You are our last hope." Elliot glared at her, his anger surging. He jabbed a finger at his throat, then gestured wildly, demanding answers to the questions she wasn't yet addressing. How had she found him? How long had they been watching? And why couldn't she give him back his voice? She sighed, the glow around her dimming slightly. "Your silence is for your safety as much as ours. The resonance of human vocal frequencies could trigger defenses within this chamber, defenses that are indiscriminate. I would not risk your life." He didn't believe her. Not entirely. Yet the controlled desperation in her voice suggested a kernel of truth. "I will restore your voice," she added, her gaze steady, "when it is safe to do so. Until then, I need you to trust me." Trust? The very idea was laughable. Elliot folded his arms, his stance defiant, even as his pulse quickened. But before either could act further, the chamber trembled. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, sending vibrations through the ground. Erin's expression tightened, and she turned sharply toward the source. "Stay here," she ordered, her voice edged with urgency. She moved swiftly, disappearing into the glowing haze of the alien structure. Elliot was left alone, his mind racing. The chamber trembled again, and this time, the light outside dimmed, casting long, eerie shadows across the crystalline walls. He clenched his fists, his thoughts a chaotic storm. He had been dragged into a world he didn't understand, with no way to defend himself and no answers that satisfied his growing unease. But one thing was clear. Whatever was happening now, it was far from over. The chamber's tremors grew stronger, their rhythm unsteady, like the pulse of a faltering heart. Elliot stumbled, bracing himself against one of the shimmering walls, his breath shallow and rapid. The crystalline surface beneath his feet no longer felt solid. It rippled faintly, as if the ground itself were alive and uneasy. Erin had vanished into the luminous haze moments ago, leaving Elliot alone in his silent imprisonment. Now the faint glow of the alien structure dimmed further, casting deep shadows that crawled along the translucent walls. The humming noise, deep and resonant, had shifted to a sharper, more piercing tone, its vibrations rattling through his chest. He clenched his fists, his frustration and fear bubbling dangerously close to the surface. What now? He thought, though the silence within him made the question feel hollow. Then, without warning, a jagged crack appeared in the crystalline wall to his right. It wasn't large at first, just a faint fracture spidering outward, glowing faintly as it spread. Elliot stared, transfixed, as the crack deepened, radiating light that pulsed with an unsettling rhythm. Instinct screamed at him to move, but where could he go? The chamber offered no obvious exits, no safe haven. The tremors intensified, and the air grew colder, biting against his skin. Before he could make a decision, the fractured wall shattered outward, sending shards of light and crystal into the room. Elliot flinched, raising his arms to shield himself, but the shards dissolved before they touched him, breaking apart into harmless motes of light. Through the breach, a new sight emerged. The world beyond the chamber was both beautiful and terrifying. Towering spires of crystal stretched into a sky swirling with colors that defied description. Rivers of light flowed through the alien city, their glow casting an ethereal luminescence over the landscape. But it was what loomed in the distance that held Elliot's gaze. A massive rift had opened in the ground, a chasm that glowed with a sickly green hue, contrasting starkly against the serene blues and purples of the city. The rift pulsed with energy, its light reaching toward the sky like jagged claws. Around its edges, figures moved, dark, indistinct shapes that seemed to flicker in and out of focus. Elliot's chest tightened. The shapes were humanoid, but there was something wrong about them, something disjointed. Their movements were jerky and uneven, as if they were marionettes controlled by an unskilled hand. They appeared to be emerging from the rift, climbing out with an unnatural fluidity that sent a chill down his spine. A sudden noise snapped him back to his immediate surroundings, a sharp metallic clang from the far end of the chamber. Elliot turned, his heart pounding, to see Erin re-enter the room. She was moving quickly, her normally graceful demeanor replaced by a hurried urgency. "We are out of time," she said, her voice steady but laced with tension. Elliot glared at her, his silent demands for answers plain on his face. He jabbed a finger toward the broken wall and the chasm beyond, his expression a mix of fear and accusation. Erin didn't flinch. Instead, she crossed the room in long, purposeful strides, stopping just short of him. Her silver eyes searched his face, their glow reflecting both her resolve and something deeper, an unspoken regret. "They've come through," she said quietly, as if the words carried a weight she wasn't ready to bear. Elliot shook his head, gesturing again toward the rift. "Who? What?" Erin hesitated. "The Voidbound," she said at last, the name falling from her lips like a whispered curse. "They are the reason we sought you, Elliot Kane. The reason we've monitored your world for so long." She raised her hand again, summoning another holographic display. This time the images were darker, more chaotic. They showed figures similar to those emerging from the rift, humanoid yet twisted, their bodies distorted by jagged lines of green energy. "They are a parasitic force," Erin continued, "a scourge that consumes and corrupts. For millennia, we've held them at bay, but now—" Her gaze flicked toward the rift, visible through the shattered wall. "Now, our defenses are failing." Elliot stared at the images, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. He wanted to demand answers, to shout his confusion and anger into the void. But his silence held him captive. Instead, he slammed a fist against the crystalline surface of the floor, his frustration spilling over. Erin's eyes softened, though her posture remained tense. "I know you are angry. You have every right to be. But if we fail now, this—" She gestured toward the rift. "Will spread, not just here, but across worlds, including yours." The weight of her words settled over him like a crushing wave. His world? He thought of Earth, its flaws, its monotony, its quiet comforts. The idea of it being consumed by the chaos he'd glimpsed through the rift was almost too much to bear. But what did she expect of him? How could he, a man whose greatest challenge until now had been navigating office politics, possibly make a difference? As if sensing his thoughts, Erin stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Your DNA carries the key to stabilizing the prince, and through him, we can reignite the barriers that hold the Voidbound at bay. Without you, Elliot, there is no chance." Her words were desperate, yet they carried an unshakable conviction. She wasn't asking for his help, she was declaring its necessity. Elliot stared at her, his mind a storm of emotions, fear, anger, confusion, and an unwilling flicker of responsibility. He didn't know why this had been thrust upon him, but one thing was clear. The choice, whether he liked it or not, was his to make. Before he could respond, if silence could be called a response, the chamber trembled violently. Erin's head snapped toward the rift, her expression darkening. The shapes had multiplied, their jerky movements growing more erratic as they swarmed the edge of the chasm. "We need to move," she said sharply. "Now." She extended a hand toward him, her silver eyes locking onto his with an intensity that brooked no argument. For a long moment, Elliot hesitated. Then, with a deep, steadying breath, he took her hand. Whatever came next, he realized, would change everything. The world beyond the crystalline chamber was colder than Elliot expected, its air charged with a strange metallic tang that left his skin prickling. Aaron led him through a series of corridors carved from shimmering, translucent stone that seemed alive with shifting light. The tremors continued beneath their feet, growing stronger with each passing moment. The distant hum of the rift had evolved into a low, keening wail that seemed to echo from every direction. Elliot's silence weighed heavier now, a gnawing frustration that matched the tension coiled in his chest. He walked behind Aaron, her figure steady and sure even as the walls around them trembled. She didn't glance back, but her voice reached him, calm but clipped. "We're heading to the Ascension Core," she said, her words carrying a gravity that made Elliot quicken his steps. "It's the heart of Elantharis's defenses, and the only place where we can stabilize Kalor's condition. Without it, the barriers holding the Voidbound back will collapse entirely." Elliot furrowed his brow, his silent questions mounting. Why me? What happens if we fail? The weight of his forced role in this alien crisis felt crushing. As if anticipating his thoughts, Aaron slowed, casting a glance over her shoulder. "I know this wasn't your choice, Elliot, but if we don't act now, everything, your world, my world, will be consumed. The Voidbound do not stop. They do not spare. They devour until nothing remains." Her words lingered in the air, a grim reminder of the stakes. They emerged into a vast chamber that made the previous crystalline halls seem small and fragile. The core stretched before them, an enormous sphere suspended in midair, its surface glowing with shifting patterns of blue and gold. Streams of light spiraled upward from the ground, feeding the sphere in pulsating waves. The chamber's walls curved inward, forming a dome inscribed with symbols that pulsed faintly with the core's rhythm. But the core wasn't as it should be. Elliot noticed it immediately. The irregular flickers of light, the faint cracks forming along its surface. The sphere pulsed unevenly, as if struggling to maintain its integrity. Around its base, figures in flowing silver garments worked frantically, their hands moving over glowing consoles. "Elyson Core Guards," Aaron said, motioning to the figures. "They've held the Voidbound at bay for centuries, but even their strength has limits." As they approached, one of the Core Guards turned to Aaron, his expression grim. His skin, like hers, was a luminous blue, though his eyes burned with a brighter silver intensity. "You've brought him," the man said, his gaze shifting to Elliot. There was no hostility in his tone, but there was something disconcertingly clinical in the way he studied Elliot, as though appraising a tool. "He's the one," Aaron confirmed. The Core Guard nodded curtly. "We must proceed. The rift is expanding faster than we anticipated." Elliot stepped back instinctively, his unease mounting. He gestured at the core, then at himself, his expression demanding answers. Aaron placed a hand on his arm, her touch unexpectedly gentle. "Elliot, the core is failing because it lacks a stabilizing force. Kalor's DNA is only part of the solution. Yours is the other. The two of you share a sequence, a resonance, that can restore the core's balance and seal the rift." Elliot's eyes widened, his pulse quickening. He gestured furiously, his movements frantic. "Why didn't you tell me this before? What happens to me?" Aaron's expression tightened, and she looked away for a moment before meeting his gaze. "The process will require a sacrifice," she admitted, her voice quiet but steady. "Your DNA will need to be infused directly into the core, and the strain on your body." She trailed off, but her meaning was clear. Elliot stared at her, his mind reeling. He shook his head, stepping back again. He didn't sign up for this, didn't ask to be abducted, silenced, and thrust into an intergalactic crisis. And now they were asking him to give up everything for a world that wasn't his own. Erin stepped closer, her silver eyes imploring. "I know this isn't fair, Elliot. But if we fail, there won't be anything left. Not for me, not for you, not for anyone. The void-bound will spread to Earth, and there will be no stopping them." Elliot's breath came in shallow gasps, his hands trembling. The crystalline floor beneath him rippled faintly, mirroring the turmoil within him. He wanted to scream, to demand an alternative, but his voice remained locked away, a cruel reminder of his powerlessness. The Corps guard approached, his expression as unreadable as ever. "The choice is his," he said, his voice firm. "We cannot force this upon him." Erin glanced at Elliot, her resolve faltering. "Elliot," she said softly, her voice breaking slightly. "If there was another way, I would take it, but there isn't. Please." The chamber trembled violently, cutting her off. The glow of the core flickered dangerously, and a loud crack echoed through the space as a new fracture split its surface. The rift's keening wail grew louder, almost deafening. Elliot clenched his fists, his chest heaving. The memories of his ordinary life on Earth flickered in his mind. Nights spent staring at the same blank office walls, the same routine, the same loneliness. He thought of the faces of those he passed on the street, strangers who would never know his name. And then he thought of the chasm he'd seen, the horrors crawling out of it, and the image of Earth consumed by the same darkness. His decision settled over him like a heavy cloak. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped forward, his movements resolute despite the trembling of his limbs. He locked eyes with Erin, his expression hard but not without understanding. She seemed to sense his choice before he even nodded. Her gaze filled with something between gratitude and sorrow. "Thank you," she whispered. The Corps guard gestured toward the glowing sphere. "When you're ready," he said. Elliot swallowed hard, his throat dry. He had no words, no voice to speak them, but as he placed his hand against the surface of the core, he felt a strange calm settle within him. The sphere's light flared, enveloping him in warmth and energy. And then, the world dissolved into a blinding glow. The light faded slowly, like the dying embers of a great fire. Elliot's consciousness returned in fragments, a kaleidoscope of sensations and impressions that he struggled to piece together. His body felt weightless, adrift in a sea of warmth and stillness. For a moment, he wasn't sure if he was alive or if the core had claimed him entirely. Then came the sound, a faint, melodic hum, low and resonant, like a symphony echoing from a distant world. It wasn't the keening wail of the rift, but something steadier, more harmonious. It pulsed through him, a rhythmic vibration that felt like the heartbeat of something vast and eternal. He opened his eyes. The chamber was transformed. The core, once fractured and flickering, now glowed with a steady, radiant light. The fractures had vanished, replaced by intricate patterns of gold and silver that shimmered across its surface. Streams of energy coursed through the air, weaving a lattice of brilliance that stretched toward the dome above. Elliot blinked, his vision adjusting. He realized he was no longer standing, but lying on a smooth, crystalline platform. The air felt different, lighter, cleaner, as if the tension that had suffused it before had been swept away. "Elliot?" The voice was soft, hesitant. He turned his head to see Erin standing nearby, her silver eyes wide with something he couldn't quite place: relief, awe, and perhaps a flicker of guilt. "You're awake," she said, taking a step closer. Elliot sat up slowly, his movements tentative. He felt different. There was no pain, no weakness, but a strange energy coursing through him, as if the core had left a part of itself within him. "What happened?" he mouthed, forgetting for a moment that his voice was still gone. But as the words formed, a sound followed, a faint, raspy whisper that startled him. Erin's expression brightened. "Your voice," she said. "It's returning." Elliot touched his throat, disbelief mingling with a cautious hope. He tried again. "What happened?" The words were clearer this time, though his voice was rough and uneven. Erin hesitated, then knelt beside him, her gaze steady. "You saved us," she said simply. "The core accepted your DNA. It stabilized Kaylor's sequence and reignited the barriers. The Voidbound have been sealed away, at least for now." Elliot frowned, her words sinking in. He glanced toward the core, its brilliance a stark reminder of what he had sacrificed. "And me?" he rasped. Her expression softened. "The process changed you," she admitted. "The core took what it needed, but it also gave something back. You're connected to it now in a way that no one else is. You're a part of this world." The weight of her words settled over him. He wasn't the same. He could feel it. A resonance deep within him, an unspoken bond with the core and the energy it radiated. He wasn't just Elliot Kane, the office worker from Earth anymore. He was something more, something irrevocably tied to this alien world. A sudden movement drew his attention. Across the chamber, figures emerged from the shadows. The core guards, their silver eyes glowing, approached in solemn formation. At the center of the group was Kaylor. The prince's appearance was striking. Taller than Elliot had expected, his blue skin luminescent and his silver eyes piercing. He moved with a regal grace, though his steps were tentative, as if he were still adjusting to his newfound strength. Kaylor stopped a few paces away and inclined his head. "Elliot Kane," he said, his voice smooth and resonant, "you have done what no one else could. You have given me life, and given my people hope." Elliot stared at him, unsure how to respond. The gratitude in the prince's gaze was genuine, but it only deepened the weight of everything Elliot had endured to bring them to this moment. "You didn't ask for this," Kaylor continued, his tone softer. "And yet you chose to act. That choice will be remembered, not just by my people, but by the stars themselves." The chamber fell silent, the prince's words hanging in the air. Erin stepped forward, her voice gentle. "There's one final decision, Elliot," she said. "The core's connection to you means you could stay here. You would be an honored guest, more than that, a part of this world's future, or—" She hesitated, her expression unreadable. "Or?" Elliot prompted, his voice stronger now. Erin met his gaze. "We can send you back to Earth." The offer caught him off guard. He had assumed the choice had already been made for him, that his connection to the core was permanent, binding him to this place. "Back?" he echoed. Erin nodded. "The core's power can bridge the distance, but if you go, the connection to this world will fade over time. You'll remember, but it will feel distant, like a dream." Elliot's mind raced. Earth, the life he had left behind, the mundanity of his existence, the quiet nights, the coffee-stained desk. It was a life he had longed to escape, but it was also familiar, safe. And then there was this world. Beautiful, dangerous, and alive with possibilities he couldn't yet comprehend. A world where he had made a difference, where he had mattered in a way he never had before. He looked at Erin, at Kaylor, at the glowing core that pulsed with a steady, reassuring rhythm. His voice faltered, but the decision was clear in his heart. Erin smiled faintly, as if she had already known what he would choose. "Then it is done," she said softly. Elliot glanced at the core one last time, feeling its energy hum within him. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew this. He wasn't the same man who had been abducted from Earth. He was something more, something stronger. And for the first time in his life, he felt truly alive. The air was alive with sound, 1,000 unnameable hums and whispers threading through the dense canopy above. Dr. Owen Lark paused mid-step, his boots sinking into the mossy ground, his senses taut. He had spent years immersing himself in alien ecosystems, but Virath 9 was unlike any world he'd ever encountered. It wasn't just alive, it was watching him. The massive trees, their bark smooth and black as obsidian, loomed high into the heavens, their branches interwoven to form a latticework of crimson and violet leaves. Bioluminescent fungi clung to the trunks, casting faint glows that shifted as if in response to his presence. Somewhere to his right, a deep, guttural croon echoed, too resonant to be wind and too deliberate to be anything natural. Owen's breath came shallow as he tightened his grip on the scanning wand in his hand. He had heard stories about field biologists disappearing in remote alien regions. Consumed by the unknown was the common euphemism back at the university. But he'd never thought he'd feel so close to becoming one of those cautionary tales. He crouched, brushing aside a cluster of needle-like ferns to reveal the object of his study. A peculiar plant with fleshy, segmented petals extended upward from the underbrush, its movement slow but unmistakable, as if tasting the humid air. Owen activated the wand, watching as its interface began to display spectral data, the text scrolling too fast for his human eyes to follow. Don't think about the noise. He forced himself to focus. Think about the discovery. A sudden rustling to his left made him freeze. The sound wasn't the rhythmic sway of leaves or the snap of a small creature darting through the undergrowth. It was heavier, deliberate. He turned his head slowly, barely daring to breathe, his eyes scanning the dimly lit forest. Nothing. Still crouching, Owen reached for the small holocam strapped to his belt, intending to record the moment. But as he straightened, his reflection flickered in the holocam's lens. Not alone. Behind him, barely a shape in the half-light, was a figure. He spun on instinct, his heart hammering. The figure remained still, but its presence struck him like a physical force. It was massive, at least 7 feet tall, with limbs longer and leaner than human proportions. Its skin, or was it armor, gleamed faintly like polished onyx, its texture broken only by faint, jagged ridges along its arms. Its face was angular, predatory, with 2 glowing yellow eyes that locked onto his like twin suns, piercing the forest gloom. For a moment, time suspended. Owen stumbled back, the wand falling from his hand. Every nerve screamed for him to run, to flee back to the safety of his research vessel and leave this place behind. But his legs refused to move, frozen by a potent mixture of terror and curiosity. The creature didn't advance. It tilted its head slightly, a motion eerily human in its inquisitiveness. Then, to his astonishment, it spoke. "Human," it said, the word guttural, shaped by vocal cords unused to his language. The sound reverberated, almost as if the forest itself were joining the syllables. Owen blinked, his mind scrambling to process. He had prepared for encounters with alien fauna, not intelligent beings. This was uncharted territory. You speak my language?" he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. The creature didn't answer immediately. It stepped closer, its movements fluid yet controlled, as if reining in some immense latent strength. Owen tensed, his muscles coiled to bolt, but instead of striking, the creature stopped just a few paces away. "You should not be here," it said. The phrase weighted, almost regretful. Its eyes narrowed slightly, and Owen felt the unspoken threat beneath the words. I'm a xenobiologist," he stammered, trying to maintain eye contact. "I'm here to study this planet, to learn, not to harm." The creature's lips, if they could be called that, parted in what might have been a sneer or a smile. "Learn?" it repeated, as though tasting the word. Then it crouched, bringing its face level with Owen's. "Do you know what you risk?" Before he could respond, a distant howl pierced the air, low and mournful, making the ground beneath him tremble. The creature straightened abruptly, its head snapping toward the sound. "Go," it ordered, its voice sharper now. "Leave this place." Owen hesitated. The scientist in him screamed to stay, to ask questions, to bridge the gap between their worlds. But the primal part of his brain overruled it. "Wait," he said, his voice trembling. "Who are you?" The creature didn't answer. Instead, it turned and melted into the shadows, as if the forest had swallowed it whole. Owen remained rooted to the spot, the silence around him even more oppressive than the sound of its voice. Slowly, he retrieved his scanning wand and holocam, his hands shaking. Whatever this was, it wasn't just an ecosystem to document. It was something far older, far more dangerous, and now he was part of its story. Owen began retracing his steps toward camp, every nerve still on edge. His mind buzzed with questions, but one stood out above the rest. Why didn't it kill me? As he walked, the shadows seemed to shift around him, and for the first time he noticed something he hadn't before. The forest was no longer watching him. It was following. The warmth of Owen's camp was a hollow comfort. The faint hum of his power generator mingled with the chirps and distant howls of Virath 9's twilight, creating a fragile cocoon of normalcy. He sat cross-legged inside his portable shelter, the dim blue glow of his holopad casting long shadows across his face. His fingers hovered over the device, trembling. The encounter replayed in his mind with agonizing clarity. The luminous eyes, the guttural voice, the palpable strength contained in that alien form. No animal, no matter how intelligent, could have done what it did. That being, whatever it was, possessed sentience, understanding, and a purpose it hadn't yet revealed. Owen exhaled sharply and leaned back against the shelter wall. He couldn't report this. Not yet. The scientific protocols drummed into him at the university felt insufficient against the enormity of what he'd stumbled into. A sentient species meant diplomatic ramifications, cultural studies, a cascade of political interference. The idea of sharing this discovery, this moment, with the bureaucratic machinery of Earth made his stomach churn. And yet, he glanced at the bio-crystal sample on the floor beside him. It was small, no larger than his palm, but its facets pulsed faintly, resonating in rhythm with his own breathing. This was no ordinary mineral. It was alive, or connected to something that was. It had caught his eye during the trek back to camp, lying half-buried beneath the moss, almost as if it had been placed there deliberately. Owen reached out and picked it up, feeling its cool, smooth surface. When he held it close to his ear, a faint hum tickled his senses. Not sound exactly, but something deeper, like the vibrations of an unseen current. He had scanned it earlier, but the wand had returned only gibberish, its data scrambled beyond recognition. His thoughts were interrupted by a sharp crack outside, like the snap of a branch under heavy weight. Owen froze, every nerve lighting up. He placed the crystal back down and turned off the holopad, plunging the shelter into near darkness. The only light came from the faint glow of the bioluminescent plants outside, casting shifting patterns against the walls. Another sound, a low, deliberate growl, rose from the forest. Not the mournful howl from earlier, but something closer, more immediate. Owen moved slowly, grabbing his handheld light and scanning wand. He unzipped the shelter flap just enough to peer outside, his heart pounding. The clearing beyond was quiet, almost serene, but the stillness felt artificial, a mask for something lurking beneath. The growl came again, this time accompanied by a rustling in the bushes near the perimeter of his camp. Owen aimed his light toward the sound, the beam slicing through the shadows. Two eyes reflected the light, smaller than the luminous yellow ones from earlier, but no less unnerving. The creature stepped forward, its form revealed. A quadrupedal predator with sleek, dark fur and a mouth lined with sharp, glistening teeth. Its body was lean, built for speed, and its tail whipped back and forth like a pendulum. The predator prowled closer, its muscles coiled, ready to spring. Owen's hand tightened around the light. He considered retreating into the shelter, but the thin fabric walls wouldn't hold against an attack. His other option was the flare gun on the supply crate behind him, a last resort meant for emergency signaling. He began to back toward the crate, keeping the light trained on the creature. Its eyes tracked his every movement, unblinking. Then, from somewhere in the trees, a sharp guttural command rang out. "Enough!" The predator stopped immediately, its body going rigid. Its ears twitched as it turned its head toward the voice, whining softly. Owen's breath hitched as the figure from earlier emerged from the shadows, stepping into the clearing with the same fluid grace. The predator retreated, slinking into the underbrush at the figure's approach, leaving Owen alone with his unexpected visitor. "You," Owen said, his voice shaky, but laced with a flicker of determination. "What are you doing here?" The being didn't answer right away. It tilted its head slightly, its luminous eyes narrowing as it regarded him. Then, with deliberate care, it crouched down and placed one clawed hand on the ground, tracing a line in the dirt. "You stay," it said, its guttural voice softer this time, almost contemplative. "Danger grows." "Danger?" Owen echoed, his curiosity momentarily overriding his fear. "What kind of danger? The predators?" The being didn't respond directly. Instead, it reached out toward the biocrystal inside the shelter, its eyes glowing brighter. "This," it said, the word heavy with meaning. "Call things." Owen frowned, glancing at the crystal. "Call things? What does that mean? Are you saying this crystal attracts predators?" The being rose to its full height, looming over him. "Not predators. Worse." Before Owen could ask what worse entailed, the being stepped closer, its presence filling the small clearing with an almost magnetic energy. It extended one long, clawed finger toward the crystal and then toward Owen's chest, the gesture slow and deliberate. "Your choice," it said, its tone grave. "Keep it, or leave." Owen hesitated, his mind racing. The crystal was his first tangible discovery, something that could unlock the mysteries of this planet. But the being's warning hung heavy in the air, an ominous weight pressing down on him. He looked up at the towering figure, its expression inscrutable. "Why are you helping me?" For the first time, the being's gaze softened, the hard edges of its predatory visage giving way to something almost sorrowful. "Not help," it said quietly. "Debt." The word sent a shiver down Owen's spine. Debt? To him? To humanity? Before he could press for more, the being turned and melted into the forest once again, leaving only the faint echo of its voice behind. "Choose wisely." Alone once more, Owen sat down heavily, the crystal still pulsing faintly at his side. His mind churned with questions, but one loomed above the rest. What am I risking by staying? Outside, the forest hummed with life, the boundaries between safety and danger growing ever thinner. The forest stretched endlessly, an alien labyrinth of shifting shadows and faint glimmers of light. Owen trudged forward, his footsteps muffled by the spongy moss beneath him. The biocrystal rested securely in his pack, its faint hum reverberating in his thoughts with maddening constancy. He had spent the morning cataloging flora and sketching unfamiliar fauna, hoping to anchor himself in the familiar rhythm of fieldwork. But his mind wouldn't settle. The encounter with the towering figure, its warnings and enigmatic presence, loomed over him like a storm cloud. Worse, the word it had left him with, debt, echoed relentlessly. A term so human in its weight, yet so alien in its context. Who was this being? And what had humanity done to invoke such a word on a planet so far from Earth's influence? He paused by a shallow stream, its waters shimmering faintly with bioluminescent particles. Kneeling, he dipped his hand into the cool flow, letting the sensation ground him. The ripples disturbed a shoal of tiny fish-like creatures, their translucent bodies darting away in synchronized waves. As he filled his canteen, his gaze caught something strange upstream, a shard of the same biocrystalline material embedded in the rocky bank. Smaller than the one he'd already collected, it gleamed with the same soft internal glow. Owen hesitated before moving toward it. Each crystal seemed tied to the mystery at the heart of this place, and yet he couldn't shake the feeling that collecting them was akin to disturbing a sacred site. Still, the scientist in him demanded closer examination. He reached for the shard, his fingertips brushing its smooth surface, and the world shifted. A wave of disorientation swept over him as the forest around him dimmed, its colors dulling like a fading dream. The stream froze mid-flow, the ripples turning to glass. His breath caught in his throat as a faint hum, far louder than before, rose around him, resonating not in his ears, but deep within his skull. Shapes began to form in the air, indistinct at first but gradually sharpening into figures. Not solid, but projections, translucent and glowing with a faint blue light. They moved with purpose, their forms tall and sinewy, bearing a striking resemblance to the being he had encountered. Owen stumbled back, his heart racing. The figures were communicating, or at least they appeared to be. Their gestures were fluid, their movements deliberate, as though reenacting a moment frozen in time. The scene began to shift. The figures gathered around a structure, something organic and immense, its surface pulsing with light. Owen realized it was a biocrystal formation, far larger than any he'd seen. The figures appeared to be working on it, their actions a mix of reverence and urgency. Then came the second group. These figures were smaller, their forms distinctly human. Owen's breath hitched as he recognized the unmistakable outline of human environmental suits, their design outdated but familiar. The humans approached cautiously, one of them holding a cylindrical device that pulsed with light. A transaction of sorts seemed to take place. Gestures exchanged, objects handed over. The air grew heavy with an unspoken tension, even within the phantom memory. And then, the shift. The towering figures recoiled as the humans activated their device. The glow of the biocrystal dimmed, its pulsing rhythm faltering. The alien figures gestured frantically, their movements increasingly erratic. The humans, however, were already withdrawing, their expressions unreadable behind their helmets. The vision blurred, the figures dissolving into motes of light. As the world around him returned to its vivid reality, Owen collapsed to his knees, his breaths ragged. The stream flowed once more, its gentle babble incongruous against the gravity of what he had just witnessed. "What the hell?" he whispered, clutching his head. The trek back to camp was a haze. The vision replayed in his mind, its implications a storm he couldn't escape. Humanity had been here before, here, on Vyrath 9. And whatever they had done, it was tied to the crystals, and to the debt the alien being had mentioned. Back at camp, Owen dropped his pack and sank onto the ground, staring at the biocrystal. Its glow seemed more pronounced now, as though it, too, remembered what he had seen. He had to know more. Grabbing his holopad, Owen began poring through the expedition archives, searching for any mention of prior human activity on Vyrath 9. The planet had been classified as unexplored, an uncharted territory. Yet the vision was irrefutable evidence of something else. After hours of searching, he found it. A single buried file marked with a clearance level far above his own. The metadata suggested it was over 2 centuries old, originating from a long-defunct exploratory fleet. His attempts to access the file were met with layers of encryption. Frustration mounted as he tried bypass after bypass, the holopad's interface stubbornly resisting his efforts. Finally, with one last desperate override, the file opened, its contents spilling onto the screen. What he read sent a chill down his spine. The file detailed an exploratory mission to Vyrath 9, led by Earth's early xenoscience division. The team had encountered a sentient species reliant on biocrystals for survival. According to the report, the crystals acted as a neural network, connecting the beings to their environment in a symbiotic relationship. The humans had studied the crystals and harvested them. The logs grew increasingly clinical, detailing the extraction process and the immense value of the material for Earth's burgeoning energy crisis at the time. The mission ended abruptly, the final entry ominously vague. Expedition terminated. Local cooperation secured, proceeding with withdrawal. Owen closed the file, his stomach churning. Cooperation? No. What he had seen in the vision was no cooperation. It was betrayal, a theft of something vital. His thoughts spiraled, the weight of the truth bearing down on him. Humanity had come to this world as saviors, but they had left as thieves. And now, centuries later, he was here, walking the same path. The biocrystal pulsed beside him, its hum deepening as if in response to his turmoil. A low growl echoed from the forest edge, snapping him back to the present. Owen scrambled to his feet, his eyes darting to the tree line. The predator from the night before stood there, its yellow eyes glowing faintly. Behind it, the towering figure emerged once more, stepping into the clearing with slow, deliberate strides. "You see now," it said, its voice heavy with accusation. "What they did." Owen swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't know." The being tilted its head, its eyes narrowing. "But you carry their debt." Owen's grip on the holopad tightened. He didn't know what was worse, the accusation in its tone or the truth in its words. Owen stood frozen, the towering figure before him, casting long, flickering shadows across the clearing. The predator at its side prowled restlessly, its yellow eyes reflecting the faint light of the biocrystal resting near Owen's feet. "You carry their debt." The being's voice was steady but laced with the gravity of an ancient wound. Owen took a cautious step back, his breath shallow. "I didn't know. I had no idea what happened here until the crystal showed you," the figure interrupted, gesturing toward the shard. Its eyes bore into Owen's, unblinking, heavy with judgment. "You touched the thread. Now it touches you." "The thread?" Owen echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. The being stepped forward, its massive form towering over him. Despite its sheer size, there was no malice in its movements, only purpose. It crouched, its clawed hand tracing slow, deliberate lines in the dirt. "This world is woven," it began, its voice quieter now, almost reverent. "Life here is not like yours, separate, divided. It is one thread, one mind, one pulse. The crystal is its heart. To take it is to sever the thread." Owen's chest tightened. The vision had been horrifying enough, but hearing the being describe it was worse. Humanity's actions had not just damaged this world, they had broken something fundamental. "And the humans? The ones who came before me?" Owen asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. "They spoke of aid, promised cures." The being's voice grew sharper, the pain of memory bleeding through. "We trusted them. They took what they needed, and they left. The thread began to fray, and our people began to fall." Owen's knees felt weak. "But your people survived," he said, his voice tinged with fragile hope. "Barely." The being stood again, towering over him. "We rewove what we could, but the thread was never whole again. It is why we made the vow." "The vow?" "To spare your kind," it said, each word deliberate. "To honor the part of them that meant to help, even if they brought harm." The silence that followed was deafening. The weight of the being's words pressed down on Owen like an unseen force. "I'm sorry," Owen said finally, though the words felt hollow. "I didn't come here to take anything. I just wanted to learn." The being tilted its head, its glowing eyes narrowing. "Then learn," it said simply. The being led Owen deeper into the forest, the predator following silently at its side. The path was treacherous, the moss-covered ground giving way to jagged roots and slick rocks. The forest seemed alive in a way Owen hadn't noticed before. Leaves rustled without wind, and faint pulses of light traveled through the ground, connecting trees to one another like veins in a body. After what felt like hours, they reached a clearing. At its center was a structure unlike anything Owen had ever seen, a massive biocrystal formation, its surface shifting between solid and fluid. It pulsed with a rhythm that matched the faint vibrations beneath Owen's feet. "The heart," the being said, its voice soft. Owen approached slowly, his hand instinctively reaching out to touch the crystal. Before his fingers made contact, the being's clawed hand shot out, stopping him. "Not yet," it said, its tone sharp. Owen pulled his hand back, his curiosity tempered by caution. "What is it?" "It is the thread's center, the last whole piece." The being gestured toward the crystal. "To lose it would mean the end. To repair it requires trust." Owen frowned. "Repair it? How?" The being didn't answer directly. Instead, it motioned for him to follow. They moved around the heart to a smaller, almost hidden structure at its base, a cluster of smaller crystals arranged in a spiral. The being crouched beside it, tracing patterns in the dirt again. "Your people left more than harm," it said. "They left the cure. It is why we survive, even as the thread frays. But it is locked away, and only your kind can unlock it." Owen stared at the spiral, his mind racing. "Are you saying the cure is encoded in the crystals?" The being nodded. "A gift, or a burden. We do not know, but it is tied to your kind." Owen's pulse quickened. The biocrystal he had collected hummed faintly in his pack, almost as if in response. "If I can unlock it," he began, his voice hesitant. "Could it repair the thread?" The being's eyes glowed brighter. "Perhaps, or it could destroy what remains." Hours passed as Owen worked. The spiral crystal formation was complex, its surface etched with patterns that pulsed faintly in sync with the heart. Using his scanning wand and holopad, Owen began to analyze the structure, cross-referencing it with the data from the encrypted file he had accessed earlier. The deeper he delved, the more he realized the enormity of the task. The crystals weren't just a material, they were a code, a language far more intricate than anything he had encountered before. Each pulse, each shift in light, was a message, a fragment of a story spanning centuries. The being watched silently, its presence both reassuring and unnerving. The predator remained at a distance, its eyes fixed on Owen with a predator's intensity. Finally, Owen found it, a sequence embedded deep within the crystal's patterns. It was unmistakable, the genetic blueprint of the cure humanity had left behind. But there was more. As he decoded the sequence, another layer emerged. It was a failsafe, a lock placed by the original expedition to prevent the crystal's full power from being accessed without human intervention. Owen leaned back, his mind racing. To activate the cure would require him to interface directly with the heart, to unlock the failsafe and release its energy. But the risks were enormous. A misstep could destabilize the entire system, destroying the last remnants of the thread. "You hesitate," the being said, breaking the silence. Owen looked up at it, his face pale. "If I do this wrong, I could destroy everything. Or you could save it," the being replied simply. The weight of the decision pressed down on Owen. He had come here as a scientist, seeking knowledge and understanding. Now, he stood at the precipice of a choice that could shape the fate of an entire world. His gaze shifted to the heart, its pulsing light reflecting in his eyes. "I'll do it," he said finally, his voice steady despite the fear churning inside him. The being nodded, its expression unreadable. As Owen reached for the interface, the forest seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with anticipation. The hum of the biocrystal deepened, resonating in his very bones. He placed his hand on the heart, and the world around him exploded with light. The moment Owen's hand made contact with the heart, the forest seemed to come alive with a force beyond comprehension. Light burst forth from the crystal, cascading in vibrant waves that pulsed outward like ripples in a still pond. It was as though the planet itself had awakened, the hum beneath Owen's feet intensifying into a low, resonant thrum that traveled up his spine. For a breathless moment, he was caught in the center of the storm. His vision blurred, the biocrystal's glow consuming everything around him. The towering figure, the predator, the trees, they all faded into a shimmering void, leaving only Owen and the immense crystalline structure before him. And then, the voices began. They were faint at first, a distant murmur on the edge of perception. But as Owen's mind adjusted, the voices grew clearer. An overwhelming cacophony of whispers, each one distinct yet part of a larger, harmonious whole. It wasn't speech, not in the way humans communicated. It was something deeper, an exchange of emotion and memory, a tapestry of countless lives woven together through the thread. Owen felt himself being pulled into the current, his own thoughts dissolving as the voices surged around him. Images flashed through his mind, rapid and vivid. He saw the world as it once was, a thriving, interconnected ecosystem where every creature, plant, and crystal pulsed with the same rhythmic light. The thread wove through all of it, binding the planet's inhabitants in a seamless symbiotic balance. But then came the fracture. The arrival of the first humans was a stark contrast, their technology harsh and angular against the planet's organic harmony. The memory of betrayal played out once more. The extraction of the crystals, the severing of the thread, and the slow, agonizing unraveling that followed. Owen's heart ached as he witnessed the devastation. The beings had fought to survive, to adapt, but the damage was irreversible. Their numbers dwindled, and the thread weakened, its once brilliant light dimming to a fragile flicker. Yet, within the sorrow, there was also hope. He saw the creation of the heart, the last intact node of the thread, and the vow made by the towering beings to protect it at all costs. The memory of humanity's cure, both salvation and burden, was etched into its surface, a final act of penance left behind by those who had caused the harm. As the vision subsided, Owen felt the weight of the being's trust settle over him. They had waited for centuries, their survival tethered to a fragile hope that one day another human would come, not to take, but to give. When Owen's senses returned, the heart was glowing more brightly than ever, its pulses in perfect harmony with the vibrations beneath the earth. The towering figure stood nearby, its gaze fixed on Owen with a mix of anticipation and quiet resolve. "You have seen," it said, its voice softer now. Owen nodded, his throat tight. "I've seen, and I'll finish this. I owe you that much." The being tilted its head, a gesture that Owen had come to recognize as one of curiosity. "You owe us nothing," it said. "But the thread, it owes itself another chance." Owen turned back to the heart, his hands trembling as he activated the sequence on his holopad. The data he had decoded earlier, the genetic blueprint of the cure, appeared on the screen, a complex web of patterns and pulses. The failsafe loomed before him, a final barrier designed to prevent the crystal's full potential from being unleashed. Owen hesitated, his fingers hovering over the interface. If he succeeded, the thread might heal, but if he failed... The being stepped closer, its presence steadying. "Do not fear the unknown," it said. "It is where we all begin." Taking a deep breath, Owen entered the final command. But the heart reacted instantly. Light erupted from its surface, brighter and more intense than before, bathing the clearing in an otherworldly glow. The pulses quickened, their rhythm matching the frantic beating of Owen's heart. The ground beneath him trembled as the energy spread outward, carried by the thread to the farthest reaches of the planet. Trees lit up with veins of light, their bioluminescence surging to life. The predator let out a low growl, its eyes glowing faintly as the energy coursed through it. And then, silence. For a moment, Owen feared the worst. But as the stillness stretched on, he felt something new, a warmth, a presence that seemed to envelop him completely. The thread wasn't just alive, it was awake, its fractured pieces knitting themselves back together in a slow, deliberate weave. The towering figure let out a low, resonant sound, a note of relief and gratitude that echoed through the clearing. The predator moved to its side, its predatory intensity replaced with a calm, almost docile demeanor. Owen stepped back, his legs unsteady. The heart's light had softened, its pulsing now gentle and steady. "It is done," the being said, its voice carrying a note of quiet triumph. The journey back to camp was unlike anything Owen had experienced. The forest, once dark and foreboding, now felt vibrant and alive. The light of the thread pulsed faintly through the ground and trees, a testament to the healing process that had begun. When they reached the edge of the clearing, the being stopped, its gaze fixed on Owen. "You are part of the thread now," it said. "Your actions will ripple through it, as ours have." Owen nodded, the weight of the moment settling over him. "I'll make sure humanity knows the truth," he said. "What we did and what we owe you." The being's eyes glowed faintly. Truth is a powerful thread. Wield it wisely. With that, it turned and disappeared into the forest, the predator following close behind. Back at camp, Owen recorded everything in his journal. The biocrystals, the thread, the vow, and the cure. It was all there, meticulously detailed. But when it came time to transmit his findings to Earth, he hesitated. The encrypted file flashed on his screen, a reminder of the consequences of humanity's curiosity. In the end, he closed the file and turned off the transmitter. Some secrets, he realized, were better left woven into the thread. Owen stepped out of the camp, the forest glowing softly around him. As he gazed at the distant horizon, he felt a profound connection, not just to the planet, but to the vast, intricate web of life it represented. For the first time, he understood what it meant to be part of something larger than himself. And as he began the long trek back to his landing site, he carried with him not just the weight of the past, but the hope of a future where the thread might remain whole.